it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer, really, standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes, and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Please remember to visit the website podcastufo.com for past episodes, blogs, and forums. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. This is Martin Willis, your host. And today we have a good show. We have, the first hour, we have Mark Richfield. He's sitting in for Dave Cote, who says he has too much on his plate at the last minute. And this is about a UFO detection system, a satellite called CubeSat. It's an Indiegogo project. We're going to be talking about that. And in hour two, or somewhere around there, we're going to be having Preston Dennett on, and he's going to be talking about his book, UFOs Over Nevada. And great guy. It'll be fun to talk to him. You can call in or you can jump in the chat room at podcastufo.com. The call-in number, 603-967-4030. Wait till we have our guests, though, if you would. Thank you for supporting the show. If you do, you can listen to the whole show for just $1 or more a month. And you may want to jump into that because January 1st, the minimum's going up to $2 a month. And we may be adding another show. It's going to be totally separate from this show. It's going to be on other topics, some paranormal, and just a big variety. And that will be airing, I do believe, on Friday night on the Dark Matter Digital Network. I don't have that confirmed yet, but also that will be available free to anyone that subscribes. It's not going to be available on the podcast, but it'll be anyone that subscribes can pick it up with the other podcast. So that is enough blabbing for me. And what is going on, Alejandro?
Not mucho. Well, I shouldn't say that. A whole lot is going on. So lots of stuff.
Good.
Too much stuff to go into a whole thing. You know one thing that's going on?
What?
Real estate. Did I tell you I'm doing real estate?
Yeah. I'm really excited.
So if you're in Arizona, go to eastvalleyproperty.com. That's right, eastvalleyproperty.com to meet all of your real estate needs.
I'll let you get that plug in. That's good. Hey, yeah, and the properties, there's some good deals out there. And, boy, this time of year, it's a nice place to be.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot going on, so it depends on the area. So, you could have a city where everything's going well, but your neighborhood's not for one reason or another. So it takes some analysis to figure out, how the market's going in your particular area.
Oh, by the way, I'm in my new studio. This is my new studio that I've worked on. I've got new equipment in here. I hope it sounds a little better.
Wow, it sounds great.
It should for
you were sounding good before, though.
Yeah, but now it's nice and quiet. There won't be any dog in the background or other noises. However, there could be squirrel noise now and then. I have, we've talked about the squirrel issues I have. I've been, some people winterize. I have to squirrelarize or whatever you want to call it. They're doing everything in their little squirrel world to get inside buildings here. They really are.
But, I think that adds charm. Like, rest in peace, my beautiful little Chihuahua. Aww. She is no longer with us. But we used to be fun when I would do this from my house, and she would be barking in the background or something, or she would come jump on me, and I had to tell her to chill out or something. It's
the
kind
dog
of
in the
fun when
background,
you have all this other stuff going on.
Well, I was doing a show a little while ago, and my Chihuahua also. Great dog. And all of a sudden he had like this nightmare on the bed. He was laying on my bed, had a nightmare in the middle of the show. So, yeah. So, anyway, but I've got this nice little cubby hole in the back. It's not quite finished, but it's nice and cozy and quiet. So that's where I am now.
Cool.
Yeah. So what is happening?
this is kind of, can I share another story?
Sure, yeah, why not? Yeah.
Well, some people, you and I tried to do a show for my show on Monday, and I had technical difficulties, and it didn't work out, which was very unfortunate. And thank you so much for taking the time. That's really frustrating. So I didn't have a show this week. I will have one next week, and it's going to be Dave Cote, who you couldn't get. But then again, you're getting Dave Cote's buddy, who's also part of the project. This guy may be better than Dave Cote, so we don't know.
You don't know. Yeah, that was kind of frustrating. You and I had a really good show for an hour and a half, and the recorder didn't work.
Which is frustrating. But one of the things that I talked about was my visit to NASA Johnson Space Center. And this was for The Martian. So Fox actually flew me out for a press event that they were doing for The Martian to announce the DVD release, which they've announced, which in a few weeks they're going to have the DVD available. If you haven't seen the movie, it's awesome. But, of course, we got to do lots of cool stuff. If you want to hear all the details, you can go to my Facebook page at Alejandro Rojas, and I posted a bunch of pictures. You could see what I did there. But, of course, what pertaining to UFOs, to get to the point, was I did get to ask some questions, a couple people questions about UFOs. Not a whole lot. Of course, I'm there with other press. They were all really cool people, mainstream press. What's funny is many might not realize, and I think I've mentioned this, when you go visit the Huffington Post office, have you done that yet?
No, never have.
Yeah,
but in New York City.
Yeah. So if you ever go to New York City, Lee Spiegel, go visit. You can go visit him. Well, some people. You can, Martin. But,
he's a good guy. Yeah.
And the offices, you'll notice everybody's really young. So writers these days, because journalism, I actually went to school for journalism, and I didn't go into journalism because it doesn't pay well. And these are all really young 20-something. So a lot of these journalists, even in the science writers that I was with, were younger. Not all of them. But that also makes it fun because I like to, they're more fun to talk to and stuff like that. But anyway, I don't know why I went off on that tangent, to be honest. But I guess that it's not that as stuffy as you may think. And you'll see some of the reporters in the pictures that I posted. But there was a PR lady. One of the places we got to go was the mock facility. And essentially, this is where mock vehicles facility, where they have mock-ups of the vehicles where the astronauts can test. And we got to go in. We got to interview the head of the Orion space capsule or an engineer and a lot of stuff like this. But there was a PR lady who was kind of walking us around, several PR people. But there's a lady in particular who let me take some pictures and, walk back because they were kind of hurting us. We weren't supposed to go places we weren't supposed to go. And we had
Did you say they were hurting you?
With her. Yeah, they were hurting us.
No,
not hurting.
Not hurting.
Not like pain.
But, okay.
But like cattle, making sure we didn't
All right,
stray.
just wanted to make sure, because it can turn into a probing story or something.
It's an important clarification.
Yeah.
But I started to ask her, did you see this story about Scott Kelly and this picture he took, and it was, mistaken as a UFO, but it made so much press, and especially these UK tabloids. And she said, yeah, that they are aware of those stories. They are frustrating in that they have a lot of cool stuff going on. So it's frustrating when these stories get out. And I guess what we talked about and what I felt was particularly interesting about this Scott Kelly picture is all you had to do was lighten the picture and you could see it was part of the station. Forbes has done a story, which you and I have talked about, which clarified everything that happened. And we had that in our UFO report on Friday. But it was kind of interesting. She said that, they often do not respond, but it is sort of a case where they don't want to acknowledge some of these stories that are silly. And I don't think UFOs are silly, obviously. I don't think looking for UFOs in NASA pictures and images is silly. I even encourage people to, like in our Open Minds News Facebook page, to post pictures if they see something weird so we can all talk about them. And even if it comes out to be something mundane, that's okay. But you know what? These stories are silly, these recent ones, or a lot of them, these press pick up on, because they don't do their due diligence to do any investigation. And often the people who post these pictures immediately claim them to be alien in nature without having any research. So that's what frustrates them, and that's why they don't like to acknowledge some of these stories. And I can see their point, because it becomes kind of a boy who cried wolf thing. When the media comes to them, or some, kind of fringe media, even if I were at Open Minds to come to them, they've got this bad taste in their mouth already from these stories that were not well researched, and these assumptions were made. So then their knee-jerk reaction is to not take these stories seriously. So it kind of showed me how lots of these stories do serious research in this area, harm in that it does damage our access to, serious NASA.
But let me just ask you this. Mm-hmm. Would they ever respond to something? For instance, going back to the Johnson Space Center, back in 2000, there was Donna, I'm trying to remember what her name was, Donna Hare, I believe it was, whistleblower type, came forward and said that they were, Donna Hare, that they were editing out images in NASA. This is someone that was a contractor there in Building 8. And, so what about something like that? Would they actually answer to these things anyway?
I don't know. I don't work at NASA.
But you mentioned to her, they don't take these things seriously, but do they take anything seriously when it comes to UFOs?
Well, I don't know if they've been asked that question, and they have commented before on so I'm sure they do take something seriously, but typically NASA-related stories have not panned out. And, of course, there are at least a couple of cases I can think of. That one you're referring to. Of course, she said she was told this by someone, and, it was kind of a secondhand thing. There was another Disclosure Project witness who said he actually worked there and saw stuff. So I'm not sure if they've been approached with those stories, and that would be interesting to ask. But and I don't know that they've commented on those. So, but who knows if they've been approached on those and approached in a serious manner. Mm-hmm. They have a lot to do. One of the things with this visit is just the immensity of the work they have before them. And that was another thing they said. They're so focused on what they do, they don't even have time to pay attention to the press or what's going on. I asked the astronaut, Drew Fustel, who we got to interview, about this too. And he said, you know what, to be completely honest, before you mentioned, the first time I heard about this picture that you're talking about was when you mentioned it just a minute ago.
Wow.
I don't even know that story. But he's like, I don't know any story. Even when you guys ask me about, and it's true, he did answer these questions this way. When people said, do you think The Martian is doing well? Do you think the movie is helping NASA? Do you think the public? And he's like, I don't know. I'm too busy focused on my job.
Wow.
I don't know what's going on with the public or what the public's talking to. So I have to ask you back. I don't know. What do you think? You would know better than I would. So he as an astronaut is just unaware. But we interviewed, the lady in charge of the food, who's a chemist, and she's, her full attention is the science around the food. The guy who is an engineer for the Orion capsule, of course, he's trying to get his capsule ready so they can take people to Mars in the 2040s is their goal.
Wow. That's great that you get to actually speak to these people. Amazing.
So they're really busy. They're really focused on their jobs.
Must have been a really fun experience. I was at Goddard a while ago, and this past July, I think it was, and that was really, really exciting to be in see what's going on behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. I had a nice tour of Goddard.
Yeah, I think this is all really interesting. Of course, one of my mentors in the UFO field is John Schuessler, who was one of the founders of MUFON. He was a director for a period of time.
Nice guy.
Yeah, great guy. And he worked for NASA as a contractor, and he would do brown bag lunches at NASA, at Johnson Space Center, and talk about UFOs. So, interacting with him and others, I don't get a sense that that a lot of these guys just are knowledgeable or interested. They're like most of the rest of the public. They're focused on their own jobs and what they do, so they don't have time to look at anything else. And they would need to be given something extraordinary in order to do so. Even John himself, it was a hobby on the side. Obviously, he was interested, but some of the people inside who have an interest, I don't get the sense of this major conspiracy of secrecy that, some people believe exists. Even, if you look at some of the great cases out there, it's more there. You hear more about the Air Force taking material and then you never hearing about it than you do, I think, of anyone else.
All right. So what else is happening?
What else is happening? Other than that, we've got a few other UFO stories on the site, of course, luckily, because I've been so busy with the UFO Congress that I have not been able to write much. I want to write about my experience and, my discussion that we just talked about with the NASA guys, and I will, but Roger Marsh, luckily, from MUFON has a couple really great stories out there right now. We posted one that is a video of just a point of light, but the witness says they saw a cylinder UFO. But one of them that I think is really interesting is this sphere in Texas. This is a witness who says on November 22nd, 2015, at 8 a.m., he saw this sphere that had a green laser kind of light. Looked like it was searching for something on the ground. So this guy became scared that it was going to come close to him. Then it flew away very quickly. But a really weird story of this orb, scanning the ground. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, wasn't it like 8 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, 8 a.m. in the morning.
So it was a daytime, and he could the beam of light was so bright that he could actually see it during the day, which really that's wild.
I guess it's probably bright enough there by 8 a.m. It might still be dark there.
Well, that's true.
8 a.m.
Sure. This story kind of leads me into something I wanted to talk about real quickly, and that is the wonderful, excellent documentary film that you have on the Allagash incident. It's in our show notes. You can see it there. It's on openminds.tv as well. But what a great job that was. And I watched it last night. It was really good.
Thank you. But you deserve some credit because, I had met these guys years ago at a UFO Congress before we took it over. And I thought they were amazing. I got to hang out with them and talk with them. I thought it was great. It's been one of my favorite stories for years. So it was cool when we were able to coordinate some interviews and get them at the conference. You were luckily able to get me back in contact with a couple of them. And Michael Klein, our video director of videography, our videographer here at Open Minds, he deserves a ton of credit because he spent months putting this together, and it's a free documentary. It plays, I think, as a really good documentary.
Yep, it's like 44 minutes long.
Mm-hmm.
And
so,
yeah.
I love it because these guys get to tell their story in their own words. You get to see their faces and their reactions. They're so natural. These are just down-to-earth guys. I think it's a great telling of the story. So we're extremely happy to be able to get this out there so people can know this story because it's a really important one. Mm-hmm. And, so this was a big deal for us to put this together and get it out. And so thank you so much. I'm glad you like it. We've gotten a lot of great feedback. This is free that we put out there. A lot of people complain we should put everything out there for free. And we try. We put a lot of stuff out there for free. I mean, we put more free stuff out there on UFOs than you're going to find anywhere else. But, none of this is free. We spend literally hundreds of thousands of dollars on our conference. And and we don't make money overall at this. So it's and some of those people who complain, quite frankly, how much money have you spent on this field? If we weren't charging like maybe $5 for you to watch some of this stuff, then we wouldn't be able to do it at all. It just wouldn't happen at all. So in order to make this happen, we appreciate, people contributing or helping us out with $5 here and there. So
yeah.
I don't think that's a lot to ask.
No, and it's for instance, I just got my bill for bandwidth use, and I get a lot of downloads. So every little bit helps anyone that is in this field. So everything is appreciated. One thing I do want to talk about with the Allagash incident is I got the idea to watch what I could find last night on other accounts of them all talking about this going way back, not near the beginning, but, maybe in the 90s and or maybe earlier. I'm not sure. They look pretty young. But, the one thing about them is their story never changes. Their story is always exactly the same.
Right.
Getting to actually meet these guys and talk to them, to me, I think it's right up there, neck and neck with Travis Walton. It's solid as a rock.
I agree with you. It's an incredible case. So, I encourage everyone to please watch it. It's free on our YouTube page. I think that you'll really enjoy it.
Yeah, I think we went a little long today. So we're probably going to have to wrap it up. Is there more news available on openminds.tv?
Yeah, I think we covered a lot, and there's always more at openminds.tv.
All right, great. Well, thanks so much.
Yep, thank you.
All right, and we'll talk to you next week. Hang in there, everyone, for the quick music break, and we'll be right back with Mark. That was a short clip from Carrie Lloyd Whitehouse. It's a short clip of a longer version, and all that music's available on our website. That music's by Carrie Lloyd Whitehouse, and he creates the music for this show. And that one is titled Allagash. So I thought I'd play that after we were talking about the Allagash. So now we have our guest, Mark Richfield. How are you?
Hey, Martin. I'm doing not too bad. Yourself?
I'm doing great, and thanks for joining us. Now, Dave was set to come on, and something came up, and here you are.
Yeah, Dave, because he's more directly involved in all the technical aspect and the fundraising and all the logistics that go along with this, he has more than his fair share of a workload. So he tapped me for a favor. And I got the job of coming over here and talking to you.
Now, you've been involved in this thing from the very beginning. Is that right?
Not quite the beginning. Dave and I have known each other for, I guess 4 or 5 years now. We were basically coffee shop friends. We went to the same place and see each other's face there, and you kind of wave, hey, I recognize you from the last 20 times. And after a while, we got talking and just got to know each other, found we had some things in common. Then I learned after a while that he had this very cool idea of putting this little private satellite into space. And again, we just got to talk about it. And he said, look, would you like to come on board with this? We could use all the help that we can possibly get. So I thought, hey, this is kind of a cool thing. I've never heard of anybody doing this before. And I thought,
right.
this is a totally excellent thing to get involved with. So here I am.
Now, before we get into exactly what this thing is supposed to do, can you tell us your background?
My background. Dave has a lot more formal training than I do. He has done his, I can't remember what the degree is he has at university. I'm more of a scientific layman. I read the books and whatnot. My background is I have I've done some work in computer network engineering, which is I string computers together so that they can talk. Currently, I'm just working basically as a blog writer. That's about it.
First, before I forget, I do want to apologize to the listener because we had a high-pitched hum in the first part of the show. I figured out it was a filter, so that's taken care of, and I do apologize for that. I never like when that happens. And I have new, really good equipment in here, so hopefully this will be a good, clear sound for everyone. Okay, so let's get into what this satellite is, and you have an Indiegogo campaign going. And
correct.
So it was his brainchild, basically, and how did he come up with it? And let's talk about the equipment and everything this thing's supposed to do.
Okay, with regards to him coming up with it, that I am not 100% sure of. I do know Dave has always been enthusiastic about the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, understanding, are we the only ones in the universe? Are these actual alien spacecraft that we see as little lights flickering in the sky from time to time? And I understand that just his searching online for different science-oriented pieces of information, I believe he just stumbled across the CubeSat, what do you want to call that, business private satellite option, and I think his imagination just went into overdrive, and he put two and two together and thought, nobody has done this before. This is something that's doable, and it could be done via a crowdsourcing. Mm-hmm. The satellites themselves, I don't know if you've actually taken a look on any of the websites, but they're basically a modular unit. Just a second here. Let me get the specs. Okay. Each modular unit is 10 centimeters by 10 by 11.35 centimeters. And basically, you've got to take whatever scientific equipment you've got that you want to put into space and make them fit that size parameter. And I believe you can, if your project is a bit larger than one single cube, I believe you can purchase several of them, hook them together, like daisy chain them to make one larger satellite. But of course, they've got to be able to fit whatever the payload restrictions, space restrictions are of the spacecraft that launches it. So perhaps they have to be put in a straight line, one block after another after another. You might not be able to put them at a right angle or something like that. But basically, they're just cube-shaped blocks.
Now, okay, so the payload of this rocket bringing these up through the atmosphere and into low-level gravity, they have an entire payload of these cubes, and each one gets deployed at certain altitudes or something?
That's my understanding of how it works. So I would assume that with each rocket, I'll just take a number off the top of my head. Maybe they can launch 10 or 20 kilograms worth of payload into space. So perhaps that would be 7 or 8 cubes, or perhaps a bit more. I guess it depends on the size, the configuration, whatever extra support materials are necessary for each satellite to be deployed. That's about all my understanding of that directly.
Okay. I have a question. We have a message board. And by the way, anyone can call in. The number's right at the top of the message board, which is on Podcast UFO, but that number is 603-967-4030. And the first question we have up here, the satellite industry is heavily regulated by the government. How has these regulations affected your strategy?
I don't believe they have affected it, Dave's project per se. these regulations already existed when he was looking into this. I believe this CubeSat program evolved within those restrictions, those laws, those codes. So he put this together with those restrictions and guidelines already in place.
I see. Okay. All right. So let's talk about the equipment. First of all, before we go into that, it must be I can only imagine it's very expensive to launch anything into space. So this fund that you have, the Indiegogo fund, what are you looking to raise?
I believe it's $50,000 altogether.
Mm-hmm. And I would just assume that a lot of that money would be just for the launch.
Yeah. I've just got the fact sheet here right now. The CubeSat kit itself is $19,625. And that is with the launch included. Then on top of that, there's the equipment that they're actually going to stick inside the satellite. So Dave wants to put in there a nanocam or possibly 2 nanocams that have got a special type of lens that allows you to see the widest possible range around you. So I believe he wants to get 2 of them, one on each side of the satellite, so we can see 360 degrees around each X, Y, and Z axis, so we can see the most that is possible. Then I believe there is a particular sort of radiation detection device.
Right. That's the scintillator counters.
I believe that's what. You're correct.
Yeah,
and that's to detect a high energy source that we would assume an alien spacecraft would have to be emitting large amounts of radiation, hopefully within a bandwidth that this device would be able to detect.
Yeah, we had someone write, they said there's very little evidence suggests that anomalous aerial objects emit ionizing radiation. And that's the type of radiation that these scintillation sensors. There's a number of things. One of the things, I know this is, it's a very glamorous thing to put something up into space and all that. But did he also think of ground detection?
I am not sure about that. My understanding, you can only read so much from the ground. You can only see or hear so much from the ground. When you're thinking about telescopes, when you look at what can be seen with a Hubble telescope up in space versus a ground-based telescope, or a radio telescope that's in space versus a ground-based array, if you can get it up there, you eliminate a lot of the electromagnetic noise that is created by our civilization. So I'm pretty sure that Dave was thinking we've got to go aerial rather than ground-based right from the start. I don't believe he was considering doing it ground-based at all.
Okay. And as far as equipment goes, I would think that something, you have this one shot. You have to really choose your equipment wisely on what you're going to fill into this very small cube size object. And did he and you, or whatever involvement you have in this, did you consult someone as far as what equipment that would be best for this type of thing?
I know Dave has got quite a few friends that are within technology, within technological fields, science fields, and I believe he was networking with them to get ideas about what could be put into this small a space to do this kind of work.
I see.
I'm not sure the names of these people, but Dave gets around. He knows quite a few people with some serious degrees in their back pocket.
Now, what about who is going to monitor? And is it just one satellite?
Yeah, just one satellite. One of the cool things about this is that anybody would be able to monitor the information that we'd be getting. This is one of the cool things that he wants everybody to have access to this information and not have it just be filtered through us. And if I remember right, it would be, the information would be relayed down in one of the ham radio frequency bands.
Ah, I see. Okay. We have someone on the message board that actually works for a satellite company.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, and he's kind of surprised about, let's see, when a company sends a satellite, only a certain percentage can be used by business. The other functions have to be shared with the government or other businesses. Do you know anything about that part of it?
No.
Yeah.
No, my work is basically PR with regards to the project. So I've been getting word out, contacting various news sources to try and get support.
I got it. Okay. Now, another message came through that said such wide-angle cameras give a very low resolution and distorted views. Low-quality images of anomalous objects get hard science. Very little or nothing is useful for hard science. Has he considered other type of cameras?
I believe he has, but it comes down to money and the size of the satellite. There's trade-offs. If you want to see the most around you, of course, the resolution is going to be lower. I mean, you could put a camera with a very, what's the word I'm looking for?
High resolution or?
High resolution, high pixel count per square millimeter. But then it's only going to be pointing in one direction, and you're going to have to be able to move it around or move the satellite around to look at things. It's kind of like you want to be able to know that there's something out there that hasn't been put into space by humans.
That's okay. Do you know about how many of these cube satellites are already up in low orbit?
I'm not sure about that. I know people have been able to put them up there for different purposes. I mean, different companies can put them up there for imaging or environmental measurements. I believe there's one or two of them that are tracking the migrations of various animals from space. I believe there's people that are even looking at doing space art through one of these.
We have someone calling in. Hang on just a minute.
Oh, sure.
Hello there, caller. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Ray Stanford.
Oh, hey, Ray. How are you? I'm
pretty good.
I'll just tell this gentleman quickly. Ray Stanford is a longtime UFO researcher, way back, starting in the late 60s, I believe, maybe even early 60s. Ray, I'm not sure. Sorry about that. And also, he was very involved in this type of scientific exploration from a base many years ago in the desert. So, Ray, go ahead and pose your question.
Okay, yeah, I have several questions. One is the statement was made that put this into space because it eliminates a lot of noises on the Earth level. That is not a valid statement. In the first place, when you use instruments on the ground, and you're not limited by one little bitty box like a satellite, you have instruments that look in a specific bandwidth. They're not bothered about the other bands. So that's not an excuse. But let me say that if you're going to have something out there in space, Martin, you visited with us Goddard Space Flight Center last summer, and you saw the incredible test facilities required to check and see whether instruments were able to sustain the space environment. Not under the low pressure, the high temperature, and the temperature extremes from extremely cold to extremely hot. Nothing has been said in this discussion about testing this equipment, whether it's even viable. Spend $50,000 of people's money, but put it up there without testing. Testing is very expensive. And here's, I want to say this too. You talked about all the noise on the surface of the Earth. I explained that. That's not a problem. But if you get up there in space, one of the big things you have to worry about is solar flares and radiation related to solar flares. And I can tell you, they spoke about a scintillator counter. Well, I'm very familiar with scintillator counters. One is they're designed in such a way that they're extremely directional, and it's going to be pointing in one direction. There's one instrument, one direction. Where's it pointing? How does it know where to point? And furthermore, you've got umpteen sources of cosmic radiation, hard radiation, ionizing radiation, including the famous gamma ray bursters that a lot more of them occur than we generally see mentioned in the newspapers when you keep up with this. This sounds like to me, frankly, that this money is far better put into a ground station. I have experience in that in 1973 to 1985. I put together a system at that time, more than $2 million system of instruments. We got excellent results. There were no problems with these noises in the magnetometer, a very narrow bandwidth. We were looking in the extreme low frequency magnetic field. And not only that, on the ground you can not only have more instruments for less expense. You don't have the expense of launching them. You don't have the expense of testing them for space viability, space environment viability. And not only that, but you potentially have real human people there. Now, yes, I agree that instrumented recordings are much more important than human observations, but when you have something as controversial as anomalous aerial objects, it's very important to have human observers there that can not only recount what was being done with the instruments in a direct human way, but can describe from the human perspective what happened while the instruments making their very useful recordings to hard data science. So, frankly, this impresses me as more of a I admire people that try to do something new, and I admire that this project in that respect, in that perspective. But it seems ill-conceived. If there were some millions of dollars to put up instruments that can orient themselves and so on, fine. But you made a good point about the low resolution of the cameras. Scintillator counter is virtually worthless out there, and the person you're speaking with said that there's evidence that these things emit hard radiation. We're talking about ionizing radiation. That is extremely moot. The fact is that I've used instruments with these things for years, and we have found no evidence of this hard radiation. There's a few cases that we need to get out of the field of view. For one thing, that is the Cash Landrum case in Texas, because that, I believe, was probably an experimental black project vehicle, highly radioactive. And yes, there was ionizing radiation there. And although UFOs, anomalous aerial objects, as I prefer, can emit at levels that can do some physiological damage, I think we need to look at something viable on the surface of the Earth and not a highly endangered instrument of a scintillator counter up in space that not only is highly directional, doesn't know where to point without other sensors, but that also is going to be quickly damaged. For example, if certain solar events occur, it could be quickly knocked out, as well as the cosmic ray events could really flatten the capability of a scintillator counter to be very effective. So that's about all I have to say. Let him take it over from there and respond to what I've said. But, I admire the attempt, but frankly, at the surface of it, it sounds to me more like a publicity stunt. Someone would like to put them on the map as being a great pioneering UFO researcher. I say pioneering is as pioneering does. The pioneering status should only be evaluated on results, not upon ideas that potentially will fall by poor planning. So thank you very much, Morton.
All right. Thank you, Ray.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. All right. Mark, so what do you say to all that?
Well, I'm not the technical guy, so I'm not savvy enough to comment on the directional capabilities of the detector. It sounds like the gentleman there had far more experience with this sort of equipment than I ever have. So I really can't comment with any degree of confidence on it. One thing that does occur to me, has his ground-based systems actually got any evidence of extraterrestrial craft?
Yes. Actually, he did, which was pretty amazing. I've actually been to his house, and he's gone over that with me.
Cool.
Yeah. And so the other part, though, that I found interesting, and I never even thought of, was the testing. Has there been any testing of the equipment to see if they'll withstand being in space?
Again, I'm not attached to the technical end of it. I would have to assume, knowing Dave, that he would have tested or he would have made arrangements to test the equipment. It would be very counterproductive to put an untested piece of gear into space, without at least seeing if it can withstand the temperatures of heat, the bursts of solar radiation that the caller referred to, or the extreme low temperatures. I know Dave is quite a knowledgeable young man. But I'm just assuming here. Mm-hmm. Also, I think that sooner or later, somebody has to take that first step to put something into space. I mean, you're only ever going to get information of a certain caliber based on ground-based systems. Sooner or later, you got to put something up there and take a chance, and that's what Dave's doing.
Yeah, and I understand the fact that it's not a high-funded project. Say an investment of millions of dollars. It would be very. I may be totally wrong in this, but I think it would be very hard to raise a lot of money for this type of investigation because, in many different ways, it's already shown that there's been no real money put into this. If Rockefeller was around and someone had brought up the idea with him, he was actually more of the funding person and had an open mind for something like this. But, like Ray said, maybe this is a project that could work, but maybe it's something that needs millions of dollars behind it for, the right type of equipment that's tested properly. NASA will never do it, but, I shouldn't say that. I don't think they will.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I don't see NASA ever taking the chance to do something like this. I think ultimately you're looking at privately funded ventures, with brave individuals. Your Richard Bransons, your Elon Musks, to funnel the money to talk to their friends to get money committed to a project like this. But you gotta start somewhere, and that's what Dave's doing. He's taking that first step, and maybe nothing will come of it. Maybe it'll go up there, and the thing, I don't know, will get hit by a meteorite, and that'll be it. But at least a first step is taken. And
so let's talk about
lots of money. Will put it into this.
Yeah, it may open the door for an idea. It would be good if there was some good hard science that would open the door, where that more people would get involved. So explain to me, if you would, how this is monitored by anybody. Is it an app situation or something like that?
Boy, I wish I had a bit more information on that. I'm not sure what the monitoring system would be. I know that it is transmitted down within the ham radio bands. I would have to assume that Dave would have a transceiver set up that would be able to translate the information to a website where anybody could log on and monitor it themselves.
All right. Now, what type of let's just say, all right, this thing is up in the sky and a UFO happens to fly by in range and it captures some type of video. Now, what's the steps on what happens with this video that's captured, and how does it become public, say, or what happens with it?
I would, oh boy, wish I had a bit more information. I would have to assume that because it's on the site, that Dave or one of our partners would be monitoring it at the time, or an individual logged onto the site would be monitoring, and would report it to the other members, and then would post that video onto the appropriate social media sites, or email it, or transmit it to the appropriate UFO groups around the world to let them know that this event has happened.
I see. Okay. So that goes for also if they happen to detect the radiation. Is there any other equipment beside those two?
No, as far as I know, those are the two main pieces. I believe if more money, if the money that they're shooting for, the $50,000, if they end up getting more than that, they possibly might be able to put other instruments into the CubeSat. What those are, I'm not sure. Yeah. As I said, I'm the PR guy. Yeah.
So maybe we can, for the remainder of this interview, which isn't too long, the other guests will be calling in shortly, but maybe for the remainder of the show, you can talk more about what you are doing to as the PR guy for this. I keep asking you questions that you really have been left in the dark on. Basically, and I understand that you're not the technical guy, but it's I would expect that you would know a little bit more about these issues, and it's too bad that Dave couldn't be on. And nothing against you. You're a nice guy. You're doing a good job, but I'm just a little surprised that you don't know more about these questions we're asking.
Yeah. I don't really have much of a comment there. I've only got the information that I got off the CubeSat website, the information that is on the Indiegogo crowdsourcing. Doing the best that I can here. With regards to my duties, it's basically getting in touch with the various media outlets to try and get as many of them on board to get them covering our effort. And that's been tough. I mean, with a lot of media outlets, as soon as you mention something like UFOs or searching for extraterrestrial intelligence, anything along those lines, they get a little leery, a little touchy. Mm-hmm. It's almost like it's seen as a dangerous area of news, which isn't going to do your career as a journalist or a broadcaster much good. Right. You're going to be perceived as a bit of a flake that you're covering these kinds of information, these kinds of news.
Now, you did a good enough job to get this out there where I heard about it, and I saw it in the news. So how did you get that out? Was that a UK paper that initially reported on this?
I believe so. All of this comes back through Dave for the most part. I've been sending them out to all of the newspapers that I can find, all of the American, Canadian, and UK media outlets, BBC, CBS, basically anybody that I can find contact information for.
All right, so after you hit the goal, say you hit the Indiegogo fee of $50,000, I believe that's what you said it is. All right, and so what are the next steps?
I believe then Dave starts purchasing the actual equipment, and again, I would assume putting it through its testing paces to make sure that it does the job that it's supposed to do. He's got to be able to pack it all into that 10 by 10 by 11.35 centimeter space, and get it all to work reliably too. As your one caller there suggested, space is a very hostile environment.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of pointless to put something up there if it's just going to get fried within 5 minutes.
Yeah, there's a lot of waste of money. Now, I can't really, I'm trying to picture this and envision exactly how this thing will work. So this is a cube that's already made, and you have to alter it to add your equipment. Is that what?
You get the cube as a kit, and you have to fit whatever it is you want to put into space within that cube, and within the weight restrictions as well.
But how does the camera come through the cube to actually work?
My understanding is you would have the lens mounted on through the outside wall of the cube.
But you're talking about this cube restriction. So so I'm envisioning that this is in the interior and then it's beveled out so the lens does not protrude past the cube?
That would be my understanding of it.
And probably the same for the other equipment?
Yeah. It's got to fit within that cube itself. So if I try to visualize this, I would assume that on the wall where the camera is going to be protruding, it would have to be beveled inwards a little bit so that the outermost perimeter, I guess would be the right word, of the lens isn't going to exceed the surface of that cube. Because I'm guessing it's got to be packed into a certain space in the launch vehicle, and if the lens is sticking out, it's going to get bashed up against, maybe another satellite or a retaining wall or something like that. Because you've also got to have the mechanism that deploys these satellites. So I'm guessing that's going to cause a little bit of rough and tumble on it. If you've got a lens sticking out, it could get, cracked, and that's the end of that.
Yeah. It's kind of like putting all your eggs in one basket, this type of thing. So I imagine there has to be a lot of thought going into this. And is Dave the type of person that can actually put this stuff together, or is he working with someone that can do this technical part?
He is working with other people. He's a smart guy. If he doesn't know how to do something himself, he talks to people that do. He finds people that are all knowledgeable in a certain area and are willing to commit some time to the project.
All right. Just 1 second. We're on if you're listening live, we're on with Mark Richfield. He's talking about CubeSat, a UFO detection device projected to launch in lower gravity and possibly see a UFO, monitor UFOs. So how does this... and also, you can jump in the chat room at podcastufo.com, or you can call in at 603-967-4030. How does that? How would that transmit signals? Now, this is just my naivety because I don't know how this works. But you have something in lower orbit, and another question I was going to ask you: how long is this projected to stay up?
When I've taken a look at the CubeSat website, it seemed that in low orbits, they can be anywhere from a few weeks to a few months before the orbit naturally decays and the satellite is burned up on reentry.
So this thing does not have a very long lifespan.
No, based on what I've seen on the CubeSat website, no, it's not like it's sitting up there for years.
But months, possibly?
You might get 2 or 3 months out of it, is what it looks like to me.
So it's going to do a lot of work fast.
Yeah.
All right, that's it for the first part of the show. If you'd like to find out more about CubeSat, just go into our show notes at podcastufo.com. And while you're there, you can support the show to listen to Hour 2. It's going to be $1 a month, and you can be grandfathered in for that, or it goes up to $2 a month on January 1st. And there's going to be an additional show, most likely. So I want to thank a few people for helping us out today. Peggy Shunning for managing the Facebook page. Carrie Lloyd Whitehouse for supplying us the music. Next week, we have the one and only James Fox on. Really excited about that show. Really been looking forward to speaking to him. All right, everyone. So we'll see you here next week, same time. Thanks a lot. This is Martin Willis saying, keep your eyes to the sky.